So what we'll start off with today is purchasing workflow, and then the second topic that we'll be covering is audit trails with audit logger. So first of all, we'll start off with purchasing workflow. Okay, so this diagram here, this shows the three different workflow solutions that we've got. And so we've got the purchasing workflow, which is the procurement side of the workflows. And so we'll focus on that today. But we've also got two other workflow modules as well. And we can do other webinars about these. So the second one is the workflow on supplier invoices, which is a payables workflow. And then the third one is workflow notifications. And so the supplier invoice workflow, that's quite quite obvious what that covers. But one area that's is the whole area of e-invoicing, and so which is in place in Singapore, and I believe it might be coming into Malaysia shortly. So we've got the e-invoicing is covered within payables workflow. Workflow notifications, this module covers over 20 different parts of Sage 300. So you can have workflows on customer master files, vendor master files, general ledger account codes, and so those key master files. So if someone adds a new customer or changes a customer, you can have a workflow on that. And it also has workflows on some of the key transactions. So for example, general ledger journal entries, AP payments, AR credit notes can all be workflowed. And so what we're really focusing on is the transactions where staff members can carry out a fraud. Then those are the areas that we put a workflow in place. Right, so if anyone has any questions about those modules, then you can contact your business partner or Sage Asia or ourselves. So what we'll do today, we'll focus on purchasing workflow. Okay, so this next diagram shows the P2P. So P2P being procure to pay, so that's the end-to-end business process that is used, in most ERP systems. So we don't have too much time, so I'll just go through it quite quickly. But you can see the 6 green boxes of the 6 main steps within the P2P business process, from setting up your master data, doing requisitions, they flow into purchase orders, then the receipt is done, then the invoice arrives, then the invoice is paid. So those are the 6 main steps in the P2P process. And with our 3 workflow modules, we've got controls across all of those 6 areas. So we have workflows in 5 of the areas. And the one area where we don't have a workflow is receiving, but we can block over receiving. So we've still got a control there. Right, and down the bottom is the attaching of documents. So with our workflow documents module, you can attach external files to your transactions, and those files are saved within the Sage database. And so they can be PDF, Word, Excel, bitmap, JPEGs, so most of the file formats. And so what that is used for, with quotes, so if the supplier sends 3 quotes for a certain requisition, you can attach each of those to the transaction within Sage. On the receiving, we can also attach receiving documents. And then with payables workflow, we can attach the invoice image, and that's where you get to the whole paperless AP. All right, so now if we move to this next slide, this is now looking at purchasing workflow suite specifically. So you can see the green boxes of the Sage 300 modules. So we've got general ledger, the accounts payable, purchase orders, inventory control, project and job costing. So those are the Sage modules, and then with our purchasing workflow suite, they're the blue boxes are the different options. So the first module is purchasing workflow, or sorry, the core module is purchasing workflow, and that's where the users can create a requisition. That requisition goes through an approval process. Could be many approval steps, so you can have multiple approval steps. And then once a requisition's fully approved, then purchasing workflow will create the purchase order within Sage 300 automatically. Well, sorry, you can have it created automatically, or it can be created manually. So that's an option as to how you want it to be configured. All right, so purchasing workflow is a front end for purchase orders. It lets you put in the delegated authorities as to what people can spend up to based on the company policies. So that's purchasing workflow. That's the core module. Workflow document, I've already talked about that one. That's where you can, that's the module that lets you attach files. Vendor catalog, that is where you can set up your approved vendors, so the system can force you to buy certain items from certain vendors at a set price, so that the vendor catalog can really put some really good controls into your procurement system. Internal issues, I won't talk about that too much, but that's really quite useful for organisations like mining and hotels where they consume the inventory. So that would take a bit of time to go through that, so we don't really have time for that today. And then on the left-hand side is funds availability. So this is the real-time GL budget checking. So the system checks the budgets from the GL, the actuals, and the commitments from the PO module, and it does that all in real time. So it can prevent, it can either warn or prevent your users from exceeding their budgets. So for some industries, funds availability is critically important. So for government departments, healthcare, education, not-for-profits, they tend to be the industries that rely on funds availability heavily. Okay, and then up above there is PW Web. So we've got a web interface. So the users, the whole procurement process can be carried out through the web using our PW Web, and that's a connected service. So that's running on our servers in our data centers and connecting through to the Sage 300 system using web services. All right, so, and this next slide shows our AP automation solution. So we won't cover that today because we don't have time, and well, it's not on the agenda. But this AP automation in a lot of countries like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, US, this is a really big area where companies are moving to have automated extraction of supplier invoices. So we've got a very strong solution set in that area as well. All right, and this next slide shows our PW Web, just the way that it's a connected service. So we've got software sitting on servers that are in data centers, like high-end data centers. So a user will create a requisition through their web page that connects through our software through to Sage 300 in real time, inserts the record into the database, then all the workflow processing is done within Sage 300, all the emailing and the budget checking, and then that can send an email to this person on the bottom left. They can then get that email and click on a hyperlink which takes them straight to a web page to review that requisition. All right, and this is just an example of the email that gets sent out. So you can see the hyperlink, so the users can just click on that straight away, and that will take them to the web page to do their approval. All right, so what we should do now is just have a look at the software in action. So what we'll do is go to our PW Web. So the first point is that if for a company that's running PW Web, they will have their banner at the top of the page rather than our banner. And so they put in their username, so that's their Sage username and their password, and it will show the companies from the Sage drop down. And then when they click login, so PWWeb's now connecting to the Sage system, checking if that password is correct. And then if it is correct, then it is checking, it's reading their security resources from the Sage server. So you can see these menus that are shown here. So you can see approvals, transactions, inquiries, substitutions. So what is shown on these menus is driven from the security within Sage 300. So yeah, this is very much like a portal to the Sage 300 system. And what a lot of companies really like about this is that the whole purchasing function, the users are not accessing the ERP, but they're interacting with the ERP in real time, but they're kept out of the ERP. So a lot of finance managers view that as a very big plus for this whole solution design. So if we come in and do our requisition, or if I just talk some of the other options, so we can do a requisition, we can do a PO receipt, we can do a punch out requisition, which is quite an advanced web-to-web transaction. We can do a PO change order, and then we can create a PO and an AP invoice in here as well. So we'll just select new requisition. And so we need to choose our workflow. And now this shows us the workflows that we've got access to. And also it shows us which cost centers that we've got access to. So you can limit the access that the users have. We'll select a template. So let's say it's a conference in Singapore. And so by selecting a template, it's brought the lines onto the screen for the user. So we've put a lot of effort into making the system easy for the users, so they don't need to be IT experts or accountants. We have a lot of companies who use this where the users are operational people. So if we have put in our airfares, 2 airfares, $400. And then we've got our accommodation. So let's say it's 3 nights accommodation. And I'll delete that line just to show you how to delete a line, and then to add a new line, we come into the item number and we can just start typing some characters and it narrows down the list straight away. So it's very easy. Users don't need to know item numbers. They just can type in the description for the item. Then in this description field, we can overwrite it. In terms of the vendor code, we can just start typing characters as well, and it narrows down the list of vendors. And you can see it's built the GL code as well. So that's quite a key feature of purchasing workflows, the ability to build GL codes for the users. All right, so we've got our 3 lines on our requisition, and if we want to come and attach some quotes, we can come to documents, we select the files to attach, and so here's the first quote. And then we can attach multiple files, so there's no limit to the number of files. You can limit the size of each file to make sure that a user doesn't attach a large file, like a video. Okay, so now we've got our 3 lines on our requisition. We've got our 2 supplier quotes, so we're happy with that. So we now click submit. So this purchasing workflow, or PWWeb, is now inserting this requisition into the Sage database and putting it into the workflow. And so the workflow engine is then deciding, or based on the configuration, working out who to send this transaction to. So you can see it's created requisition number 686. And so what the user can do, they can come into inquiries and my requisitions, and they can always see, like they can inquire on the status of their requisitions. So here we've got, you can see we've got ones that are unapproved. So here's our one number 686. And so we can click on that to open it up. And the key thing we can do is we can come into the Events tab and we can see which user this requisition is sitting with. So a requisition can always look at their requisition and see who's it's waiting on. Right, so we now log out from there and we'll log in as the division manager. So the division manager would have got an email, and that email would have a hyperlink in it, which if they click on the hyperlink, it takes them to this page. So very easy for the managers to use. And so now, because this is a manager, they have now got the three different approval consoles. So we've got the purchasing, which is the one we'll be looking at in a minute, but this, I've got it set up to default to the invoice approvals. So here, these are the 10 or so invoices that this manager has to approve. So you can see there's some AP invoices, there's some PO invoices, and there's some credit card expenses for some of the staff as well. And so that's supplier invoices. Then we've got our other approvals. So if we had approvals of general ledger journals or AP payments, then they would show up there. But if we come back to our purchasing approvals, so this now shows us the 6 requisitions that this manager has to approve. So what the manager they can see the dollar value and the description on this this list here. They can click on the requisition to open it up to look at the details. So they can see airfares, accommodation, taxis. They can see the supplier, the quantity, the value, the currency, the GL code. They can look at the documents. So any quotes that are attached or any other supporting documents. I just opened up in the browser. And so that's inquiring on that requisition. They can also edit that requisition. So this is a question when you implement the system is, do you want the manager to edit the requisition, or do you just want them to say yes or no? So that's a design option when you're implementing the system. But and another feature if you have funds availability is here. The manager can just check their GL budget just by clicking on this icon, and within that short amount of time, what the system has done is it's gone back to the general ledger and it has read the budget for the GL codes on that requisition. It has read the budgets from the GL, and has read the actuals from the GL, and has read the commitments from the PO module. And then it's just calculated all that in real time. And so you can see that we don't have any budgets in here, and that's because we've just moved into 2021. So we don't have any budgets in our sample data yet. But really, so that manager can see straight away what's the state of their budget. Are they going to blow their budget or not? All right, so like I say, for some industries, that's critically important. All right, so what a person does from PW Web, from the approval console, if they wanted to, they just change it here from approve to decline. So let's say we want to decline this one, and then we'll say something like, there is no description. So there's a 60-character field that is used by the approver, and so you can put it in a comment whether it's an approval or a decline, and these comments are kept in the database. They can also be emailed. So if you're doing a decline, we always recommend that the manager puts in a reason why it's declined, and then the requisitioner will get an email saying your requisition has been declined and the reason why is X, Y, Z. Right, so I'll decline that one, but I'll leave our one sitting there, number 686, because now what we can do is have a look at our smartphone app, which is called PT Go. So I'm showing this to you in a browser, but this is exactly what it looks like on an Apple or an Android phone. And so we click the login, so now it's just gathering the data. I think I've changed this over to another database because I had a bit of an issue just before Christmas, and we just need to. Yes, obviously we just got back from our holidays, so haven't quite made that correction. But anyway, you can see it would just show the requisition sitting here. So here it's just showing 3 AP invoices, but the requisition would be sitting here. So if we click on this arrow, that drills in and shows us all the list of the transactions. So in this case, it's invoices, but in purchasing it'll be a requisition. Then if we want to look at the details of one of those, then we can click on the arrow, and that now shows us all the details of the requisition. So it shows the airfares, the accommodation, and the taxis. And then we can approve it from within the smartphone app as well. Right, so that's something we've had on the market, or we first released that just over a year ago. So we're getting some very positive feedback about that. So what I'll do, I'll just go back into PW Web and do the approval there, because my PT Go is connected up to a different database, different server, I should say. So I come back into purchasing and come and approve this. Right, and then I click postmark documents. That now moves it along to the next step in the approval process. If there's only one step, if it only needed the one approval, then that would now be creating the POs within Sage 300. I happen to know that it needs 2 approvals. So what we'll do now is we'll go and look at our Sage database. And so I'm logged in as the controller. So if I happen to know that it's been routed to the controller for a second approval. So the controller can come to the approval console, and here they can see they've got 4 transactions to approve. And here's requisition 686 at the bottom. And so the functionality, so this is now the second approval of that requisition. The functionality of PW approval desktop is pretty much the same as approving in the web. So we can double click, open it up. We can go and look at the quotes that are, or the documents that are attached. We can look at who's already approved it and what comments they put in. We can make changes if we've got the rights, the access to make changes. We can look at funds availability as well. All right, so now we'll approve that. And click post. So this now moves it along and to the next step in the workflow. So this is the final approval. So you can now see the window popping up where it's creating the POs within Sage PO module. And so because our requisition has 3 lines and each line was for a separate vendor, what Purchasing Workflow is doing is creating 3 purchase orders. So 1 PO for each vendor. If all 3 lines were for a single vendor, it would have created just a single purchase order with 3 lines. Right, so what you can do is we can come and look at our statistics inquiries. We come into management inquiry. This shows us all the requisitions across the whole system. We can see our one down here now is completed, but we can still double click, so we can come and look at this from years later. We can come and look at who approved it. So the division manager approved it, then the controller approved it. Those are the comments. And if we come to the front screen on the grid, we can see the PO numbers, 724, 25, 726. All right, so now we can come and show those to you. Now those can be emailed as well, so Purchasing Workflow can email the purchase orders to people within your organization. It can email them straight out to the vendors, but not many companies like to do that. And so, sorry, if I should just slow down. So now if I come into the PO module, transactions, purchase order entry, you can just to show you that those POs are in here. So there's PO number 724 for the airfares, 725 for the accommodation, and 726 for the taxis. Now Purchasing Workflow has created the POs within the Sage PO module. And so that's the end of the life of that requisition. You can, we find quite a lot of companies in Asia want to have an approval of the purchase order before it actually goes out to the vendor, and we do have ways of doing that as well. So you can have that as part of your workflow. All right, now the next step is the receiving. So you can do the receiving in the desktop or receiving in the web. If I just show it to you in the web very quickly. So the requisitioner, if they've been to the conference, they now come and do a PO receipt. And it shows all of the open purchase orders. So you can see our 3 purchase orders sitting at the top. So we can come in here, and if the airfares, we've received the airfares. So we'll go receive all, post. And so this is now doing the receipt within Sage 300. And because that purchase order is now fully received, that PO disappears off the list because it's not able to be received anymore. Now, if we come and receive our accommodation, let's say we decided to come back one night early, so it's 2 nights rather than 3 nights, and we'll say it's completed. Came back early. So this will now do a receipt for 2 nights and cancel the 3rd night. So it's a partial receipt. So you can do a partial receipt and leave the balance on back order, or do a partial receipt and close the PO, which is what I did just there. And so that's disappeared off there. All right, so that's the receiving side of it. And then really from there, then the next step in the process is for the invoice to come in. And so that then moves across into our payables workflow module, which is not on the agenda for today. So we will have another webinar about that at some stage. All right, so, and just coming back to the Sage desktop, so there's, I guess, I mean, we're going through this quite quickly. There's a lot of areas we're not really going to be able to cover, but if I just go through a couple of key ones, reallocations and substitutions. So what that means is if someone is going on a holiday for a week, then they can put in what we call a substitution. And what that means is anything that gets routed to that manager during the week that they're on leave the system will automatically route it to another manager. Then we've also got reallocations. Reallocations are more if someone's on sick leave and a transaction's already sitting with them. So in other words, it was unplanned and the transaction's already sitting with them, then that transaction can be reallocated to another person if it's an urgent one. So those are a couple of key parts of the workflow system.